almost dead.
Drum roll, please.
Hi, I'm Katie, and this is Joe and Larry, and they're going to discuss the use of advertising in literature.
Very good.
Let's hear it for Katie.
You're stepping to Hollywood.
Go downstairs and tell them that.
So you're late.
Katie is the daughter of Sherry Sand, one of our event organizers. And so she's been helping us out this week. She's just been great. So I talked her into doing an introduction. So you've got the notes there, the handout, right? On the golden paper. As you can see there's some blanks. Does anyone need a ballpoint pen to be able to fill in the blanks? I will tell you right off the top, if you miss a blank, the answer key for the blanks is on the bottom of the last page. Okay? I teach Sunday school classes in my church a lot, and I have learned that is a real good way. It allows people to think about the thing and to write it in, and then if they miss it, they can look it up later. So I thought I'd do it here. Hope you forgive me.
Good idea.
We all really like buck knives, right? That's why we're here. So why should we be interested in a bunch of advertising material and literature and advertising, internet auctions, printed or online publication articles? Well, number one, your first blank is knowledge. There is so much to be learned from that kind of thing. Secondly, if you build a display, whether you build it for your home display or a display at a show, good literature, especially framed and matted, the displayer in me is coming out, is a great way to enhance your display. So for display enhancement would be your second line there. The third one is one that I use all the time, is for future reference, or to archive for historical significance. I use my literature like that a great deal. Can any of you think of reasons why literature and advertising materials, knife box inserts, that kind of thing might be valuable? Yes.
Well, it increases the value.
Increases the value. Good. Put that down.
Sells what you want to sell.
Do you want to explain that, Howard?
I've sold stuff because they were interested in the backup, the paperwork and the pictures, and then came around and bought the whole collection from me of that particular
And sometimes it's just helpful in identifying the knife you have.
Okay.
Date
Super.
or
Super. These guys are doing great, aren't they?
I'm going to sit down.
Well, Joe is going to emphasize the more historic items, and he's going to provide examples of how he develops his buck model histories, the data sheet, the timelines using old literature, letters, magazine advertisements, and the box insert paper.
All that.
All of that. And more, you told me.
in 1 minute.
And I'm going to provide some pointers about the accumulation of material for a reference library that you can start right now. And recent year reference material is not that hard to get, so we'll be talking about that. You can broaden your base of knowledge and have it for future reference. One never knows, as I've got down in the notes there, what knives will be sought by future collectors or where your interests may go in the future. And you may be surprised at what you find yourself interested in 5 or 10 years down the road. Joe,
Sir?
you want to step in on the historic?
Sure. What I thought I'd do is just kind of briefly go over a lot of the things that I use to develop a data sheet, and I'll get into what a data sheet is a little bit more in case you're not familiar with those. But I mean, when I first got the job of being the historian, I basically had an office and a phone, and it was ringing, and people were wanting to know, how old is this knife? well, how many did you make of it? When did you make it? When did it start? When did it end? And I had no information. So I just started accumulating anything I could that had information on knives, on buck knives. Now, there isn't like, I couldn't find one source that I could say this is the end all. This here has all the information I need in it for this model. Like everything has their flaws or their little caveats or their, oh, well, yeah, but remember we did this and this. So when I try to put together a data sheet and say in that sheet, yeah, this model was made first and then this model came next, I like to get supporting information, maybe 2 or 3 points of information, data that support that thought. So one of the more obvious things that we use are just the dealer catalogs, and you're familiar with these. I've got them here in this 1 3-ring binder that has finally exploded. I've got from current back to about 1980, and you know they're really good. One of the biggest flaws in catalogs, though, is they would oftentimes take a picture and use that same picture year after year after year, even though there were little changes being made. And those are the little changes, those are the ones as collectors that we're interested in. Like, what's the significance of this change? Oh, there's only 100 of those made. Well, that makes it valuable. You know, or yeah, we changed that and ran with it for 10 years afterwards. Oh, there's 1 million of them out there. So those little minor changes sometimes are very important. They affect the value of our knives. I randomly flipped this one catalog. It's an 88 dealer catalog. On the front cover, it shows a folding fillet knife. I know that fillet knife is it's plastic and they painted it blue. You know, the original knife was actually blue rubber. Yeah, that's the one there. And it's a model that they made a mock-up so that they could make the catalog. So you know, there's a perfect example. They didn't all look like that. So another thing that I use that I don't reference enough, these are old buck blade newsletters. These things, I used to think they went back, they started doing like a monthly newsletter in about the 70s. I was helping Chuck clean out his garage once, and he had a couple of bins that were his dad's. And in that I found, feels when I have here, December 1st, 1965.
Wow.
That gets me excited because they're talking about employees and they're also talking about what's going through the shop. You know, anything that gets in the early 60s gets me excited because that's when the 110 was born. So are they going to talk about the 110? What I've gone and done is I went through all of these that I have here, and whenever they reference a particular model, I pull it out, or I note that. Here's one here, Akanua, Empress Trio, and Ranger 112. They're all mentioned in this, you know, November 1970. So sometimes there's specific information, like we just started the new handles on the 112, stuff like that. You know, that's golden. That's really good information. Some of them are a lot more vague. We're trying a new handle material on the 112. Like, so was it successful, or did you try it for a year?
Was it Sedua or was it Ebony?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that the original ones were what?
My car got
Good.
Yeah. You
Could
could build one
you
behind
copy
you.
those and make a book out of them for the collector?
I think it'd be really good, especially since these old ones are just falling apart.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, and there's good information in there. Just real quick, they talk about in the 60s the Empress Trio. Well, I don't have any records of it coming out for like another 15 years.
You mentioned the Akanua in 1970, but I don't think it was out on the market until 73. So that was, yeah.
Yeah, I got 69, 70 question mark.
But that was a clinker.
Yeah, oh yeah, Akanua, you're right.
Yep, Akanua.
I didn't bring that.
So that's 72 to 73.
So you're right.
We wasn't getting.
So, yeah. So that's another thing. You know, just to go through real quick, I have a 3-ring binder of catalogs from about 1979 back into the 40s.
Wow.
Not a lot of them. And when you get into the earlier ones dated in the 50s, the 40s, I can't assume I've got one of all of them. You know, whereas the newer ones, it helps knowing every year, boom, 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 there it is. That helps. That's a line in the sand. Some of them even have the printer's code telling the month and the year that catalog was printed. So, you know, it's one point of data that, you know, if I see a knife in there, it's like, oh, January 83 is when the catalog was printed. I know we were making them then. You know, I'm still going to look for 2 more corroborating points before I put something in a data sheet. Old Outdoor Life, January, February, March. This is the first article or advertisement that we know of so far, and I have to hold it. The binder's blown up. But there's all kinds of information in these, and the interesting thing about it is when I just say, okay, I want to do a data sheet, say on these older knives, I just start grabbing everything I have and laying it all out, all the paperwork, all the documents, and start looking at it. And sometimes, you know, that's why my office is a mess. To be on board, I did clean it up for this event.
So it's a museum.
But you look at it, and you look at it, and you look at it. I don't know if you went to Heath Stone's seminar on the older knives, the lucite knives. He was referencing the 10 categories. Those 10 categories, you know, it started off a lot fewer than 10 categories. I had actual knives on the floor at the time. That's all I had. And I started grouping them, the like knives together. And a few days would go by, and I go, well, that doesn't look right. What's this? Oh, I get it. That goes with these. And I'd regroup them. And it was probably a month that I had maybe 100 lucite knives all over my floor, to where I walked in one day and it was like, oh, I get it. Yeah, well, this here, this here, this here, this here. That makes some sort of sense. Be that as it may, that's still in one point of data. Well, let me real quickly try to go through a modern data sheet. This is the 401 Kalinga data sheet. It shows every variation that we know of so far. It lists all types of information, the blade stamp, the handle type, the guard, the steel used, vintage, you know, when it was made, how many were made, if I have that information, and any box or paperwork that's in there. Well, how would I use this information, this type of information to determine when it was, say a particular one was done? If I just opened up a catalog, here's the Kalinga with wood handles. Like, okay, great. So does that mean that in '89 they were made with wood handles? Most probably. Definitely, maybe. So I need some other source of information. For me, that's nice. We'll pretend I didn't do that. But for me, I have access to things such as actual blueprints, and it's not very many models that I do have blueprints. This one is it's the 401 handle blueprint, and usually they'll have a key, and what I look for, these list all the changes. So, like when the knife was first developed, they'll draw it up and they'll list the handle material and any other pertinent information. As time progresses, they make changes. They improve. They change handle materials, then they put it on the print that they changed, and it'll be up here in this key. Here's the only note on this blueprint. Actually says added note number 3, and that was actually by me back in the 80s, back when I used to do this sort of thing. And so you'd say, okay, note number 3, material thickness change. It may or may not help. If I get desperate enough, I'll be down there with my calipers with a bunch of 401s that I've broken apart, measuring that handle material thickness. If it's a big enough variance, I know that at this date we changed the handle material. So once we ate up through the old inventory of unknown quantity, the new handle thickness material will be in place, and that'd be another point in the sand.
Now, can I interject something with this? We understand that none of us have access to that kind of literature and material and resource. But we want you to understand that because Joe is willing to do this work and assemble this, it does get into writing that he does, either an article, a data sheet, that kind of thing. And then we have that to put in our records and in our temporary records up here as a source of knowledge that we would not have except for the fact that Joe's doing that, obviously, okay?
Yeah, and some of this, well, most definitely the data sheets. Send me an email and I'll email you the data sheets that I have. I've got them on more and more models. Every year I add more models. Each one takes a lot of research, so that's why they happen slowly. But I make them to share, because usually when I share with say someone here, say their passion is the 401, and I send them the 401 data sheet for the first time. They send me an email back full of questions. Well, how come I got this one and it doesn't fit? Like, well, let me see what you got. Oh, that's because this is wrong, and I need to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So we share what we know,
Right.
and pretty soon this gets closer and closer to the actual truth.
Wouldn't that make a nice display piece?
Well, no, it's
For the
torn.
prints? Oh, I would fix it. I'd have it professionally fixed.
I think it's interesting that this one shows the Kalinga. For any Kalinga collectors, they know the older ones have the
Right.
pointy guard. So that's kind of neat.
What's the date on that one, Joe? Was there a date?
1977.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of neat. After a while, you look at the blueprints. Say I'm chasing, I want to know when did we change. I know the first ones were black micarta. When did we change to the wood? I check the blueprints if the information isn't in there. It looks like it's not. I have the knives themselves. The Buck Knives has some new in the box examples, and then I'll go on eBay. And for 2 weeks, I'll be looking for new in the box, untampered Kalinga auctions with all the paperwork. And sometimes I'll pester the seller. What's the date code on the use and care document? And usually they don't even answer me. But the ones that do, that they'll give me the date code, so I'll know the date of the leaflets that is in that box. And that's another clue that I wanted to talk about. A little use and care leaflet that's in most of the older knives. I mean, we've been having these in the knives for many, many years. I've got a handout that I can make copies of. It's basically a decoder for the use and care leaflets. When I first noticed that there's a date on these, I thought, problem solved. Every year they print new ones. Every year it's got a date on it. Whatever that date is in that box, that's how old the knife is. I'm a genius.
It didn't work there.
I'm not a genius. To give an example, in 1973, January of 73, they did a printing of these leaflets. And it lasted part of 73, 74, 75, and into 1976. Before they used them all up, it said, we better make more. So, is it useless? It's not, because it's another shaky point another point of reference. You can rule out certain years based on the paperwork, and some of them you can pinpoint it with the paperwork.
And sometimes we do have to remember that dealers or their customers switched knives and they got in the wrong box. So finding one or two is not necessarily concrete proof, is it?
No.
We've run into that.
Yeah.
I know you've told me about that, and I've run into it. This
Yeah.
knife could not have come in this box. It was sold as new in box. It may be a new box and it may be a new knife, but they did not come out of the Buck factory together.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Makes sense? You guys all know that, right?
It does happen. So, I've just referenced everything that I know, information, the actual knives, auctions, blueprints, everything, and start filling in any blanks in these columns. Oftentimes it starts with the knives that I see, that I have. I'm a pack rat. broken 401 comes in here, it's absolutely useless, except it's a historical reference for me, so I save it. I've got boxes of broken 401, the handle, the guard, and the stamp. That's basically all I need for a point of reference. And so I'll lay them all out on the floor and start rearranging them and go, these are all definite variations. I'll plug them in here, and I can kind of tell the pre-date code ones what their chronological order is, the sequence. This one first, then this one, then this one, then this one. And I list them here, boom, 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 boom. And then start filling in all the blanks as I get information that comes up. So that's for a modern data sheet, that's how basically I go about it. Sometimes I can reference the computer, it'll give some information, but usually it's old documents, it's old paperwork, and it's trying to find at least 3 data points that all support each other, and then I'll type it in.
Are they better at it now than they used to be in California?
What, keeping records?
Keeping up with records.
No, they're just as good as they were before. So,
you got a job forever.
Yeah, job security. Now, it gets really hard when you're looking at like the lucite knives. Most of the information comes from the knives. I talked about having them all over my floor for a month. Then I would reference my, the catalogs that I have that have no dates on them. So it's like, okay, you try to put these in order based on prices, assuming that they go up with time. Maybe the handle types, model types, you assume that some go away with time, new ones are added with time. You can kind of put them in chronological order, and then since they all have their prices, you can go to the catalogs, and I've probably got about 100 catalogs, magazines from 40s, 50s, 60s with ads, and a lot of those ads have prices. So I'm looking here, it says a 105 is $5. I find one where an old catalog where it says it's $6. Okay, well that catalog is not as old. And this was in 47. Okay, it must be 48 or later because the price went up. So it can be maddening at times. It's like, okay, I want to use the catalog, but I don't know how old the catalog is, so I got to use the Outdoor Life magazines to try to determine how old the catalogs are, and then from that and all the assumptions that went into that, determine how old the knives are. So it's maddening, but at the same time it's real fun. I could talk for another half an hour on how I did well, I'm not gonna, but on how we put together the 10 groups for the old lucite knives, and it was based on a lot of assumption and a lot of loosely held together data. Charlie,
You develop as near as you can get hard fact. Are you getting this committed to a computer or some written form?
Yeah, the data sheets. That's I've got those all in like Excel spreadsheets, and
But those are all separate sheets, right?
yeah,
Club website.
yeah, oh yeah, club website. They're posted there. My dream someday is to do a type of reference book, and it'd be made up of just the facts. Not the stories. That's a whole nother book that's cool to have. That has all the stories behind all the variations. But I like one that's just a quick reference to where here's everything you need to know about a 401 on 2 pages. I'm looking at this 401. Is it rare or is it not rare? Well, let's go down. It's got a black micarta. This does. It's got a pointed brass guard. This does. It says there's stamped Buck USA. Mine's only stamped Buck. Well, you just found the holy grail of 401s if you found that knife. So, but anyways, that's what I use all of this for. And sometimes all the clouds part and the sun comes out, and it's like There's one I know positively for sure that knife was made on this date. 112 was introduced in April of 1972. I know that through old Buck Blade newsletters, and I had other pieces of corroborating evidence that just nailed it down. So, that's when I can say with confidence, yeah, that's when that one came out. Oh, one last thing, and I promise there'll be one last thing. I've got production notes from back in the day where they kind of walked through. It was like a weekly thing, a report that they put out. And I'll read that, and I think it's on like the 700 series. It'll say 701, 375 701s, first batch went into shipping today. Like, whoa, and it's dated. Hallelujah, they actually put a date on it. I don't have to cross-reference and multiply, but it's right there. So those production notes, I'll love them, because that's from the guy in the shop. That's the first batch, it's in shipping. So, anyways.
And by the way, something that goes along, you talking about the 700 series, I have 1980 catalogs, and when I say catalog, I'm using it in the same sense that Joe used this as a catalog, a four-page unit. These are 3 pages that fold over, so they're what I call a trifold, and I have them for the 1980 year that have the 703 being introduced. I have 2 versions of that catalog. One, it's called, the 506 is called the Lady Knight, and an otherwise identical catalog is called the what?
White knight.
Absolutely, White Knight. We know that had to happen awfully close in that early part of 1980, or it could have been late 79, depending on when they printed the brochures. Which gets us to the next point. Do you all know how to decipher the old printing codes? Let's take a look at that on your notes, okay? For example, knife know-how, and you can look at a couple knife know-hows up here. Are you all familiar with the knife know-how book?
No.
Okay, there were several versions of them. Joe and I have favorites. That's the old green ones from the 60s that include barrel nuts, and then later the pin tang. But anyway, a printing code on a knife know-how. For example, I have seen a knife know-how ad in the NRA American Hunter magazine, and that one said knife know-how, to write for a free knife know-how, Department AH-482. Well, that was April of '82 in American Hunter. Some of the initials and abbreviations that I see are publications that I'm not real familiar with, but usually I can figure them out. Sometimes I'll ask Joe, and he knows them. But those knife know-hows at that point tell you what was going on, department such and such, and I enjoy being able to run those down. Also, the printing code on the bottom of a Buck Mini catalog I have, and several of them, but just an example, one I looked at, you see TP 500M 1289 printed in USA. Well, TP, I'm convinced, means total printing. And 500M means 500,000 pieces in December of '89, 12 of '89. You can find that same format in a lot of items, especially from the 80s. Even this, I think there's some from the 70s under Joe.
Yeah.
I forget now. Another way to date things and run things down, and remember, not perfectly, but it's using the buck addresses, the physical addresses, and you've got them there. We know approximately from things like the blade, the buck blade, and they talk about doing this or that. And in fact, Joe, you may be able to go through some of those and pin some of these down even better over
Yeah,
time.
get the dates a little
But
tighter.
you've got, on your handout there, you've got specific dates. So when you see advertising that uses these specific addresses, well, you know that's the time frame where Buck was at Marina Boulevard or Congress Street. I will tell you that much of the literature from the 1970s and later uses just the P.O. box. So that has a much wider frame. Various items that you can consider to accumulate for this kind of thing would be old Buck brochures that we talked about, the mini versions of Knife Know-How, the dealer franchise information or dealer information sheets. And we plan later, folks, to let you all come up here and look through this material and just, you can go through the binders and you will see examples of a lot of what we're talking about. The dealer catalogs and price lists, the little consumer mini catalogs, hold a couple of those up if you would there, Joe. And those are, look at a printing code on the back of one of them, Joe. Just, there ought to be one there.
I don't have my glasses.
Oh, here, I can.
That's like one you'd reference, I believe.
Is it the same one?
500,000 on, well, December of '89.
That's it.
500 M1289.
The Buck Custom Shop catalog. How many of you have seen that? Okay, the catalog and the order form. That gives you good information. Auction sites. Believe it or not, on eBay, you can do a search for Buck Knives ad or Buck Knives advertisement. And there are actually ads that are being sold on eBay, like this one for the Classic, this one for 2 of the 700s. Sometimes they're hard to read. Sometimes I find these and I have them. Sometimes I'm not sure if I have it or not, and I'll print it out. I'll try to blow it up so that I can read the department PS 1281 on this one. And it is so small that I wrote out to the side. This is one that I think I eventually found and got an original. But until I find an original, I'll just use the eBay printout. I don't really care that much if I have it. I really want the information. Although sometimes I've gone ahead and ordered the ads or bought them if they were cheap enough, just for my binders. And we'll talk about that later. Other things to look for. Old magazine ads. And again, don't overlook online auctions. But you can go to yard sales, flea markets, any number of places and find scads of old magazines. Joe knows the dates to look for of a lot of them.
Yeah, I've had guys ask me, so they don't have to buy a bunch of magazines unknown on eBay, which ones have ads. So, as far as the 40s and 50s go, I've got those nailed down pretty good. You get into the 60s and 70s, I know of some. So if you're interested in that type of information, just let me know. I've got all that information in my computer.
So, cutlery magazines, hunting, fishing, outdoor magazines, the NRA magazines, American Hunter and American Rifleman, those are the two. They've used those same titles forever, I think. It's the only way I know them. American Rifle, I said that one. Can you think of other old magazines? Oh, Fur, Fin, and Feather, that's one. There's just a ton of them.
Field and Stream.
Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, yep, all of those. The old magazine and newspaper articles. I like to go through old magazines and just look for articles about Buck knives. I have a lot of those. And I know there's a lot more out there that I don't have, but they are out there. And they tell you information. Old Buck Knives news releases. Now, most people are not going to have a ready source of that, but I have contacts with some of the former Buck reps that have contacted me to sell their items on my consignment business. So sometimes I get some of that stuff in the literature they send me. And if there's a certain thing that I know one of my collecting buddies is really interested in, I'll make a copy and send it off to him because it helps their source of information to grow. Bill, you can attest to that,
Yeah,
right?
oh boy. I get packets on a regular basis.
Actually, I'll tell you the truth. I spend more time working on my literature now than I do my knives. And that's honest. And I get just as much of enjoyment out of it because the literature tells me about my knives. So it's fun, you know, and it's cheaper actually. I think I might say that later on in my notes here. Dealer memos with product announcements, price changes. My source for that is generally the same thing. It's from Buck reps, and sometimes some of the guys that have been Buck dealers in the past, they'll send me stuff. There's a perfect example there. You will be able to look through these after a while and you'll see what we mean. The Buck warranty use and care box inserts, Joe has talked about that, and I collect those. The ordergram, a Buck Knives ordergram, it was just basically a little card. You could fill out what you wanted. It was pre-printed with what was offered at that time and the pricing. There, Joe's got one right out, okay. And then Joe brought up the Buck blade. Actually, Joe and I were on the phone talking about this the other day, and I mentioned the Buck blade, and Joe said, "Oh, I forgot that one." And
I will drop the phone.
it's a huge one, you know. So, how do you build what I'm talking about, a Buck Knives Resource Center? Most of us that collect knives run into either space or financial limitations to our collecting. And even though it's difficult to be patient, it's really wise to wait on building a collection until we really sort out what we ultimately want to collect. Ultimate collecting interest is what goes in the line there. In spite of our such limitations, the accumulation of knife advertising, cutlery articles, and Buck marketing materials or advertisements is a great way to address the above situations. This resource is extremely inexpensive, takes up relatively little space for most people. It takes up a lot of space for me. I'll explain that later. And it allows the Buck collector to assemble a valuable library of pictures, pricing, and reference material. These binders that I have full of information are pretty thick. Most all of my binders are the wide ones. And sometimes they get so thick that I have to take 2 binders and condense or spread them out into 3 because they just get too stuffed. But anyway, I do have over 40 binders loaded with this kind of information. And I do something that I carried a little further. I also have binders just on specific series or models. And Richard Matheny came out to Buck. Well, he's been out 2 or 3 times. And Joe gave him access to Buck archives. And Dick was a guy that knew I had a great interest in literature. And he and I, over the years, have traded, and I mean provided to each other, all sorts of literature and info, trying to increase our knowledge. And Joe's been involved in that with us also. Well, Dick brought back tons of what is called an ECN, an engineering change notice. And so I got a whole lot of those. And I'm not telling you this to brag in any way. I'm just saying that I have a huge source of material like that. And that's what I use for writing the articles and researching things. Because I can't possibly remember it all. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I know pretty well and I remember, but there's certain things that there's just, there's too little good open space up here.
You know, Larry, just about Dick Matheny, I had all these ECNs. It's a document that goes around and everybody signs, all the different departments, to sign off on a change. It's pretty good because it's a dated document. It talks about a change and often pinpoints when a change is going to be implemented. And I had some here, some there, some in that box, some in that box. And on one of Dick Mathaney's trips, he completely organized it all by date, by model number, and put it in a filing cabinet. And it's a big, tall filing cabinet full of them. And there have been times when I would call him on the phone and say, I'm having a hard time. I can't figure out this one thing. I just thought, maybe I'd ask you. He said, well, did you check the ECN file? Like,
Duh.
no, I didn't. Hang on. I go over there, and there's the answer right there on an ECN at my fingertips. So I thank Dick Mathaney just about every day for all the work he's done in helping organize some of this data. And you.
Well, so as it says there, I actually do reference my literature collection on almost a daily basis. And to be honest with you, there are evenings that I will sit down at my desk or take one of these down on the couch, and I'll just go through one of them just for fun. I enjoy it. I know I'm weird, but it's fun.
Buckaholic.
I'm a buckaholic. That's exactly right. So, and especially researching for an article, I really do go back through because I don't want to be off. The club gets an astounding number of information requests on our website. And bless his heart, John just loves to forward those on to me. And so I will look those things up and get back to people. And most of the time I'm more interested in it really than they were. But sometimes I'll find someone that they'll give follow-up questions and all. So my resource center for me and my hobby is really indispensable. I access it constantly. Just a few other things, and these are just personal things that I'm going to share on it. I know some of you may prefer to keep all your records on computer, and that's great. It would take me longer to figure out where it's at and to find it than to go through these. I have an awfully good idea of where most of the stuff is because of the fact that they're dated. And I've done it for so long. I may not be able to tell you exactly the year, but I can get fairly close. So I just have to look through a couple of these. It doesn't, take that long. Also, I remember kind of, somehow when I open one up, I begin to remember, oh yeah, I know where that's at. Oh, by the way, I just opened up and there's that one ad that we were talking about. Okay, right there. Also, I like to use sheet protectors for the material. It keeps it in much better condition. If I use a and you will find a few things in here that have a three-hole punch probably, but most of my material I do use sheet protectors for. I guess the ECNs I don't because there's so many of them. And I don't care if they tear because I can take one out and put it on the copy machine and run off a fresh one and punch it and put it back in, so I don't care so much. But anyway, I really do recommend the sheet protectors. If you decide to incorporate this idea, you would be faced with an organizational decision. Should you use a chronological order or some other method? You can do whichever you want. I can tell you from experience that I think the chronological method is best. I also double up on some of it, and I will have it in two places. I'll have it chronologically, and then I'll have the same material in my binder for my 500 knives, for example. Okay.
Wow. I haven't decided yet what to do.
Because I have a little bit of an artistic bent, not to any great skill, but a little bit of creativity, I love to decorate mine. So I will try to get an era-appropriate cover and put in there, and then I play around. I put the dates on there in my business card, and I put the dates here that this covers. When I outgrow a binder, like I told you a while ago, I just peel these little things off and print off new ones. Actually, I have some I've already printed in duplicate and triplicate, and I just reach in my drawer and cut out new ones and stick them in there. It's inexpensive, it doesn't take long, and it keeps it organized. I'm a controller in my other life for a company, and so I tend to be kind of organized that way, and so I try to keep it that way. As we develop this concept, we can quickly realize that a great deal of the recommended literature and advertising items to pursue also applies to the accumulation of the older, more historical items that Joe was talking about. And for example, I also have an old one. This particular binder it starts with 1947 and it goes to 69. So there's a lot in here. 22, 23 years of things. And I just saw that one same brochure. I think it's the same one that Joe had. But anyway, obviously I have much less because it's harder to find the old stuff. So here I've got like 23 years of material in this one binder, whereas this binder covers part of 2012 and part of 2013. And if I really should probably cut them off, but I hate to have a binder sitting there only partially filled for a year. So, I'll start the new year because I don't want the overlap of the previous year to stop right there. Now,
How do you get a hole punched in those real thick cuts?
I have a heavy duty one where I work, and occasionally I have been known to use 2 pieces of wood and like plywood and a drill. And I don't recommend it, but I have done it when I have done it before. Yeah.
I just noticed something. I'd mentioned earlier how using dealer catalogs sometimes can be dangerous because the information isn't always accurate. In this one particular binder, it's a reproduction of an old catalog from the 40s. And when I first found this, I found a stack of them at the factory. I thought, wow, that's really great. Now where's the original? And I looked and looked and looked, couldn't find the original. I thought, well, that's really strange. There should be an original. How do you make a reproduction? And as I studied it, I noticed a little line when they Xeroxed it. Just a little line. It looked like it was a tear. That they copied a catalog that was torn. And I looked at it further. I looked at the catalogs, the originals that we did have, and I was able to determine that this was a catalog that we never put out. They actually morphed a couple catalogs to make a new catalog. And I'm not sure why they did it, but I thought, you can't do that because you just changed history. So I took every catalog, every one of the reprints I could find at the factory and shredded them. Like, I want these out of they need to be landfill.
And then you forgot to tell me, right?
So I'm going to have to shred this, I'm afraid.
We want to be correct.
I could just take a Sharpie and put repro.
I knew it was a repro, but I didn't know it was fabricated right there.
Fabricated. Anyways, I just had to, it was driving me crazy looking at that. I had to say something.
You have there on your list a whole lot of things in the newer era that you can accumulate, and the club newsletters are great to put in there. You will not find the club newsletters mixed in with mine. I have them separate for another reason, but I thought about going through and putting them in here also. The Buck website has press releases on a regular basis. If you go in there under what's new, you can print those off. The club website, if there's specific things you'd like to have, you can save those to your hard drive and print them off. Buck employee newsletters. Karen Cook, who's Chuck's executive secretary, every month sends me the Buck employee newsletter. And I print it off and send a copy to Bill, and I put it in my binder. So, actual or photocopies of Buck box warranty and other inserts. mail order catalog pages. Now, you guys may think I'm crazy, but I actually, oh, here we go. I actually take magazines like catalogs like Smoky Mountains, and I don't say the whole thing, but I go through and I cut out the buck sections. And what I do to keep it neater is I pull the staples and I put the buck sections in here. It is a repeat in a lot of senses, but I like to have a record of what they were offering and how much it was and when, and these things are dated. I do the same thing with LL Bean catalogs, Bass Pro. I think they're all listed there in your notes.
Larry, and I would interject too. Number one, I save those two, and I loathe to cut anything paper. I'm just weird like that. It's like, no, this is historical. I don't want to change it. So I've got just half of my room is full of those things. But the neat thing about them is a lot of these projects are exclusive to these.
To them. That's
You
exactly
won't
exactly.
find it in a buck catalog. That's the only place you'll find that information. So it's very valuable.
That's exactly right. So these two I'm going to put over here. We've got a table of items and we're going to let you guys come up and help yourself too. We would ask that you not take everything yourself, share it a little bit. There are even some Buck Company store sacks or bags from the centennial year. And they had these left over when we were out in Oklahoma for the 15-year event. And I took a handful of these home, and I've had them, and I thought, man, I need to spread the wealth around. I'd forgotten about them, actually. And you may want to take one if you want to do what I do. You could take one, fold it up, stick it in your binder for that time frame, and it's just a neat little thing to have. You're not going to learn anything really from it, but I think it's neat. Sure. Because I'm a buckaholic, right?
Yeah, when's that Buckaholic gonna come out on the cup? They're our cup. The buck cup.
On the BCCI cup.
I don't know what you mean.
Plastic cup.
The buck.
Oh,
The Buckaholic on our
okay.
mug.
That's good.
Or a
idea.
t-shirt. And we can do a beer stein.
Hello, I'm Jim, I'm a buckaholic.
Here's another one here. I think I forgot to take my name off of that one, but you all know what my address is anyway. Blade Magazine, page 31 and page 84. 84.
It's the one you cut out.
This one right here. This is an extra they always give them away at the Blade Show, and I always pick up a bunch of them because I go through and cut stuff out. When my regular blade comes, I don't want to cut it up. But when I get a chance to get an extra one, well, with the regular one, if there's something I want, I just make a print of it. I put it in the copy machine and make a print. But for the September issue, or whichever one it is that they're giving out at the Blade Show, I'll grab it and take it home because then I can cut out the real thing and put it in my binder without making a copy and it's in color. So here was one on page 84 that had something about the 110. Page 31, I think, is an ad, as I recall. Yeah. This is the Endeavor and the Century ad down at the bottom. So you can cut that out. I try when I cut out an ad, sometimes I forget or I'm in too big of a hurry or it doesn't matter. I know when to nail it. But sometimes I try to include the date. Or sometimes when I cut it out, I turn it over and the date's on the back side, so I just go with that.
You know it's like fingernails on a chalkboard every time you say cut it out.
If I didn't cut stuff out, Joe, with what I have, I
Your
would
office
have
would
room
look
for
like
my-
mine.
Yes. Here's examples now of ads.
Cut out.
Actual ads.
Oh,
Okay?
Yeah.
Actual ads.
Don't say the C word.
yeah.
I've got all kinds of stuff up here. This stuff is not for people. That you can take. This stuff you're free. Feel free to just look at. But it's all examples. Yes, Craig.
I have an ad from a little town newspaper in Texas. Then my uncle's obituary was printed in, and there's a plaque right above it. I thought that was odd.
What was the date?
Like in the early 80s.
Wow.
Huh.
This has gone a lot longer than I thought. You were really long-winded, Joe.
I just can't shut up.
So I'm going to stop, but feel free to come up and look at these items. And like we said, help yourself to those over there.